How much freedom should I give my teens?
Mr. Crandall, that is what I call Mr. Crandall. I would rather call you Coach Crandall. Coach Crandall, that is what I call a compelling question.
Ooh, I like the compelling. We usually get great question. We don't get a compelling question very often.
You like that one, huh?
I love that. That's yeah. Studio audience loves it.
Yeah, I like the word compelling. Good to see you, by the way.
Yeah,
good to be back.
It's great to be back. Always good to be back in the studio, back in the lab.
It's still odd for me. For those that are just listening, we're several weeks into our video, and you can find us on YouTube. If you look up Create, Transform, Become, our channel is Nate and Steve. And yeah, I'm still so used to us meeting together for our audio. And so now I'm looking at you remote. And anyway, it's a little odd.
Yeah, we did it that way for like a whole year.
Yeah. But hey, so where did this question come from? How much freedom should I give my teens?
Gosh, this is a super question, regardless of where it came from. But for us, it came up. We were just kind of joking around, talking about like some old TV shows. The Andy Griffith Show came up, and there was
Andy Griffith Show. It was kind of interesting to me that you even knew what it was, because we have about a 10-year difference in
almost
age.
Exactly 10 years.
And I used to watch that show. It was black and white. Andy Griffith, Ron Howard was Opie. Don Knotts, the immortal Don Knotts, was Barney Fife, his deputy. Andy was the sheriff. Aunt B was the...
And this is Ron Howard before he became director Ron Howard and all the other stuff. Like he was little Ron Howard.
Yeah, this is child actor. So I sent you a meme about Opie and Andy and Barney and a life situation, and I think that's basically turned into this podcast episode.
Yeah. Yeah,
so I think I should just read the script.
Do it.
Okay, so here's the setting. Barney and I don't know exactly what Opie was trying to choose or do. I don't know. I don't know. You could fill in the blank with lots of different things.
Yeah.
Well, he uses fishing as a metaphor, but I don't know what Opie was wanting to do. But Andy, his father, was trying, he had a different viewpoint on it, and Barney had a different viewpoint on it, and they were discussing it. So basically what happened was when Barney told Andy he should just let Opie decide for himself how he wanted to live, Andy had these words of wisdom. No, I'm afraid it don't work that way. You can't let a young'un decide for himself. He'll grab at the first flashy thing with shiny ribbons on it. Then when he finds out there's a hook in it, it's too late. Wrong ideas come packaged with so much glitter that it's hard to convince him that other things might be better in the long run. All a parent can do is to say, wait and trust me, and try to keep temptation away. So that spurred your question. How much freedom should I give my teens?
Yeah, it's such a good question. There's so many layers to that quote, and where we could go with it. But it centers around that idea as parents, is like, how much freedom do we give our kids? And I mean, there's so many things that depends on too. It's like, it's different for each kid. It's going to change for the same kid over time, depending on how things are going, the relationship's going. Age is a huge factor when it comes to this. Like with the younger the kid is, the more likely they are to chase the shiny object. And I mean, there's tons of stuff that you could get into. And I think I want to bring it back because I know it's going to come back a whole bunch. We've talked many times about how, as a parent, you want to create the feelings in your kids that you love them, you believe in them, you're proud of them, and you trust them. And I think that trust one really comes back in this, like where Andy's saying, all you can do as a parent is just say, wait and trust me. If you've built that relationship of trust with your teens, especially your teen athletes and performers, the trust goes both ways. If they know that you trust them, they're way more likely to trust you with something like this, where you have to pull rank as the parent and say, sorry, I can't, this is the best explanation I can give you. And if that's not enough for you, you're going to have to trust me on this.
That just leads to a big sigh from me. That's my contribution to all of that right there. It's a big, long sigh.
I think in that sigh, and I feel the same thing. And I think any parent that's parented a teen for longer than 35 seconds understands that sigh, because we've all been in that situation where it's like they want to do something and they want to do it really bad. And you try really hard to discourage it. And they're like, screw you, I'm going to do it anyway. And all you have, like it says, just wait and trust me. And
that
sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
Me of a famous line out there. I don't think I've ever said it. Wait, maybe I have said it. When it comes to a decision that your teen has to make, and you come back with the line, when they ask you, well, what do you want me to do? And the parent says, do what you want, you will anyway. Go ahead.
Yes. But are you getting sarcastic?
Oh, I apologize. You like to say that sarcasm muddies the water when you're talking about communication, and
it does. And when you're parenting your teens, again, it's the hardest job on planet Earth. There's not a close second, and it's because you are on 24/7 all the time. Every interaction you have with your kids is building something, but you can't get so wrapped up in that you don't have some moments of levity. But if you're not careful with the sarcasm and stuff like that, it can really muddy the water when the communication matters even more.
True. You've helped me to realize this, and this is why I have removed from my resume that when like languages spoken, I have removed sarcasm from as one of my languages that I speak. Was that sarcasm?
That on the resume? No.
Yeah.
No, I think you actually had that on your resume.
Yeah.
Fluent in sarcasm. I'm blown away, Steve, by the number of like shirts that people will wear that broadcast how great they are at sarcasm. Like, I don't know if that's something to be proud of.
Gosh, I've wanted to buy one. I've seen some really good ones. I've wanted to. I have too many T-shirts. Okay, are you ready for me to put you on the spot?
Please do. I like being on the spot. This is
because I think we're going down the road of how much are you a friend to your kids? How much are you a parent to the kids? And we are massive proponents of becoming a coach.
Yes.
For your kids. So if I were to ask you to create a recipe, let's go for perfection. Why not? What is the perfect recipe? What are the perfect amounts or percentages, measurements for parenting, coaching, and I guess I'll just call it friending. So, to keep them all ing words.
Copyright that. I don't know if that word exists, but
well, friend has become a verb in social media. I friend you.
Yeah.
Which if you would have said that to me back in my school days, I would have thought that's poor grammar.
It's like when the kids say, who are you versing?
Who are you versing? I've never heard that one.
I love it. It's mostly younger kids, like when they're talking about like the fifth graders and they're like, they see their friend and they're on different soccer teams. Oh, who are you guys versing today?
Oh, like versus?
Versing, like who are you going
against? Who's your opponent?
Who's your opponent? Who are you playing today?
Oh my goodness.
Who are you guys versing today? I love when I hear kids say that.
Versing.
Who are you versing?
Well,
back to your idea of,
my oldest son once upon a time talked about who are going to be the beaters and who are going to be the losters. We still dust that one off in our house sometimes. That's pretty funny. You know, it's another way of looking at the versing. But
I
okay,
like it.
back to the recipe.
Yes.
Parenting, coaching, friending. Is there such a thing as a perfect mix?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
I think
Talking to
so.
me.
What?
Okay, what is it? Let's go.
Well, I think it's reading situations, and what needs to happen that's going to be best for your kid at that time. And this is again why parenting's so hard is reading that situation. I think coaching's a good default because coaching's kind of a good hybrid there. You could get, and I think we'll probably bring it up later, the 3 parenting styles that get talked about in psychology a lot: authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive. But I think being intentional about what you're trying to accomplish as a parent is a really good thing. And with the friending one, it gets a little bit complex because when you're trying to be a friend, if you want to be a great friend, I would challenge every parent to look in the mirror and say, what does it mean to me to be a great friend? And you and I have this conversation. Like I say that a great friend is somebody that tells you when your fly's down. A great friend is somebody that tells you when you have food boogers in your teeth so you can clean it up and you don't look stupid. And you've talked about how a great friend is somebody that if you're going the wrong way, if you're going sideways in your life, a great friend's going to call you out and check you on that and try to keep you going towards what you really want. And if you have that higher definition of being a friend, I don't think it's a bad thing to have a friendly relationship with your teens. But if you're talking about we screw around and go toilet paper people's houses and stuff like that, that kind of being a friend, I don't know if that's the friending that you ever want to bring in as a parent. You can have fun, but as soon as it becomes being silly, that's some pretty thin ice with being a parent. Because often the silliness is, where people get feelings hurt and you do things that you're going to regret. And yeah, it's so less of that, way more of the coaching, and then pulling in the right style of parenting when you need it.
What I'm hearing here is the definition of friend is really critical.
Yeah.
And you maybe I'm not saying it exactly the way you said it. You said a higher definition, a higher level.
Yeah.
Higher definition of what a friend really is.
Yeah, because that's what true friends are those kind of friends. And there's nothing wrong with being that kind of friend for your kids. If you're holding them to a higher standard because you love them and they feel it and it's in a friendly way. There's one research article I was reading once that talked about how we focus so much on telling our kids that we love them that we kind of skip over telling our kids that we like them. And in kid land, feeling liked is a really big deal. Like they know that you love them as your parent, but they don't feel like you like them. And sometimes you've got to be a little more of a friend to help them feel like you like them.
Can you think of an example of how that might work?
Yeah, and I'm going to go straight to video games because I know it's a hot topic for people. Video games and phones. Some parents
I just have to interject that if kids are toilet papering nowadays, they probably don't know what they're doing. I mean, my generation we were the masters of toilet papering.
Yeah, they don't know how to do it anymore.
Does anybody do that anymore? Do they do that?
I've actually had it done to me just in the last few years.
Was it a show of affection?
Yes,
was it a sarcastic?
It was actually adults that did it. So,
oh really?
Oh yeah,
they were probably from my generation.
Well, it's probably a lost art. Like I think nowadays it's like you got to go straight to criminal behavior, or you just hide and play video games. But anyway, back to that idea. That often becomes a hot topic between parents and their teens, and they don't want to play video games. And so they just decry all video games. All video games are awful. And sometimes just sitting down with them and watching them play a video game or even playing a video game with them can be a good friendly move. So it's something like that where you can engage in a behavior like they might do with their friends, sit down and play a video game with them, or watch them play a video game and just cheer them on and do something like that instead of slamming all the things that they hold sacred.
Right. Well, I think this is a great place too of asking them a few questions. For example, why do you like this game so much?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It can, and making little moves like that. Like that's one thing I wish, looking back on my parenting, I wish I would have done more of that type of stuff. Is just, spent I had one son that was so ed up in Call of Duty that he just played days and days and days and days worth of it over one summer. And I kind of wish I would have just sat down and watched a little bit and just set up that conversation.
Well, I think if one thing that has come out of this our podcast journey just over a year is we can constantly reflect on how we would be better coaches, be better parents if we were to go back.
Yeah, and that's part of what drives us to do this is like we're sharing the things that we've learned because parenting is darn hard.
So what would you I mean, you said you I mean, there's a regret there. You wish you would have handled that differently. Easier to say now, hindsight is 2020.
Mm-hmm.
When you were in the moment, you were probably frustrated as a dad that you see this okay, this is this really cool
wasting
game
his time,
or what,
yeah.
but you're looking at it, this is a complete time waster, or maybe you are, the amount of time spent on it, it should be reduced quite a bit. What would you say to the mom or dad who is watching this happening right now? And they're fed up, they're tired of it, and they want to go in scorched earth and like rip cords out of the wall. I don't even know if they have cords anymore, but they want to just shut it down.
3 years from now, what do you want your relationship to be like with your kid? Because the odds are the kid's going to grow out of the video games eventually, if you handle it right. And my son did. It was that one summer he wasted a ton of time. It was a lot less the next summer, and even less following that. And now he spends all his time working with his wife and with his friends, like doing activities and being outdoors and golfing, and he rarely plays video games anymore.
I think you should repeat the question.
How much freedom do we give our teens?
No, the last one you asked.
Oh, what do you want the relationship to look like 3 years from now? And that's a lot of applause.
That's way too long of a clip. I had to cut it. I mean, 8 seconds was enough.
That's all right. I like the validation. Humans are a bottomless pit of validation, man, and I'm no exception.
Hey, I really like the question. We have to look into the future. And sometimes, I mean, we always talk about living in the present. There's no question that's where we need to live, but you've got to glance into the future. And I think that's a great question for parents.
Yeah. It gives you a valuable perspective, and because in the moment it gets so frustrating. Like I remember being super frustrated with that, and do we sell the console? Do we hide the controllers? Do we ground them? Do we do whatever? And it's so easy as a parent. So it's like I'm going to make him do what I want to right now. And this gets to our main question of how much freedom should we give our teens? If we can slide ourselves into that role as a authoritative parent, as a coach, and even a little bit more of a friend in appropriate and higher ways, we're going to get a lot further with our kids in building the relationship.
Okay, you just said a word that may be a little bit of a trigger word for some people.
The authoritative one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the three parenting styles.
Do you mean authoritarian? Do you mean
No.
Like you said authoritative.
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 There's three main parenting styles. There's a fourth that some throw on there with neglecting. But
authoritative. When you start busting out 5-syllable words.
Authoritative. Yeah, that's 5.
You
should have been an English teacher.
It actually was all my aptitude, but my high school coach warned me that I would not be able to devote the time to basketball coaching,
And grading
because
papers and
because I would just have to not even grade papers. I would just have to look at it and judge it in 2 seconds by the penmanship or something like that. And then,
yeah. Anyway,
yeah. Okay, back to
the three parenting styles. There's authoritarian, authoritative, and then permissive. And the authoritarian one is that's the one that's kind of a dictatorial approach to parenting. It's very
my way or the highway.
Yeah, my way or the highway. It's one-sided in the communication. It's the parent that I don't care what your excuse is. I don't care what reasons you think you have. It's this way. That's how you're going to do things. And that creates obviously a lot of problems. The permissive one creates just as many problems because it's like, do whatever you want. And
my parents are so cool. They let me do whatever I want.
And I used to think it was really dumb when I would hear people say that kids want boundaries. They do. They need to know that. And they know that they need to know that because they know that they have a hard time with a lot of freedom. And so kids, even if they fight against it, they like knowing where the boundaries are. And as a parent, as an authoritative parent, you let them know and that's what Andy Griffith was talking about in that thing is you've got to create that boundary for them. It's like one of the better descriptions that I've heard from it was from a guy named Jamie Gilbert, and he compared it to a boxing ring. And if you're trying to have a boxing match and there's no ropes around that ring, it's just a free-for-all brawl. You may be having it in the back alley, or may as well be having it in the back alley behind the bar or something, because there's no rules there. But when you put up the ropes and you define the playing space, now you can have what's a very competitive and fair fight. And it's the same thing with all of our sports. We might hate the referees for enforcing the rules, but you can't have a game if you don't have the boundary lines, you don't have the rules, you don't enforce those rules, because then it just turns into a free-for-all. And so it's that balance between the two. It's that authoritative style where you have the boundaries, you have good discussions about them, and then you define a space where the kids can now go and play really well and play competitively because they understand what those rules are.
So this sounds like being permissive with a plan in place that you're not going to totally take away every choice and decision from them because they need to learn. But there are also times where you're going to step in and say, wait a minute.
Right.
Because you see the end from the beginning, and that's maybe an ending that would be pretty harmful for them.
Yeah. It can be very harmful. And that's your discussion, your authoritative approach where you're setting down these boundaries and rules, you're defining the playing space. And that's why it's such an important conversation to have with your kids is define the playing space. But then within that playing space, you can give them a ton of freedom, but they know where those boundaries are. And then if they cross them, you've got a consequence. And
I really like that. I think this goes well with our expectations and agreement episode,
Yep.
a recent episode where we just make the assumption that this whole idea of expectations, because I think you're talking about this fits nicely with what you're talking about. You're talking about defining the playing space. You're basically making some mini agreements here. Yep. And deciding this is where we're going to play. This is where you're going to play. This is why you talk about choices and consequences. And sometimes there is no defined playing space, and then we're picking up the pieces later.
Yep. And it's really hard. Like when it becomes a free for all, they're just messy.
Well, if you've defined the playing space and there are some mistakes making, that was great.
Yeah, you're making some mistakes.
Yes, there are some mistakes made and there are some unfortunate consequences, or maybe there's even some broken trust. I know you always talk about how broken trust, how you respond to broken trust is really the key. But if you've defined the playing space in advance, then I think if there is some broken trust, then as we've said before, you can go back and you can focus on the agreement, the playing space, rather than spending all of the time on, hey, you blew it.
Yep. Yeah, it's having some clear boundaries and clear ideas and clear agreements allows you not only to enforce some rules, but bounce back from mistakes. Everybody, you and the kids both have a clear path to bouncing back from trust breaking.
And I think you said something really important earlier that I caught when you were talking about authoritarian style of parenting. And that was, it's a one-way communication.
Yeah.
Have you ever made that mistake? I've made that mistake. Walk in, shut the door. I even did that as a teacher in some extreme cases where kids were, I think one was the kid was about to burn the school down or something. So I felt justified. Not exactly, but you go in and you start with the line, something like, pointing finger, you're going to listen.
Yep.
I don't want to hear, here you go. I don't want to hear anything from you. Listen up. I had authoritarian coaches.
Yeah.
And I was fine with it.
Well, that was the style back then. Like it worked a little bit more.
Yeah, I did. I never went home and whined about it. I never, but that was the style. And I think you're talking about a two-way communication, yet the parent is still coaching, is still authoritative.
The parent's still in charge. And this is the blending, this is the recipe of the authoritative parenting, the coaching, and the friending. And if you get the balance right, then it allows you to be kind of a Swiss Army knife type parent where you can fit the situation. What does your kid need you to be right now?
And I think well, you tell me if you agree with this, because we talked about this recipe, this proper balance of parenting, coaching, and friending. If you get it right, and every situation's different. I mean, there's always going to be exceptions, but if you get it right, for the majority of parents and teens, the teen is going to be totally 100% on board with this.
Yes. Yep. And they might complain a little bit about, some of the boundaries sometimes, but the kids are so much more psychologically healthy when they have that kind of parenting. Like we obsess about this podcast. We love doing this because the parent-teen relationship is the most important relationship on the planet. And if we get this right, there's a lot of things that get better in our world because we have more kids that have more parents that care about them in the right ways.
Better future.
Mm-hmm. For all of us.
Okay, do you have any final thoughts? I think that's a good place to break right there. We have not done this for a while. I'm going to call a flagrant foul. I'm going to throw a flag. I'm going to call it, I'm going to give somebody a technical. Yeah. Oh, one of those. A red card. Yeah. There was and I want to kind of tap dance around this correctly because I want to focus on the lesson to be learned here. But if you've been on social media, you may have seen this. It came out the video came out this summer. I don't know when it actually happened, but it's, I believe back east, a middle school wrestling match was underway. It was a championship match for that age group and that weight class, and a couple of boys were wrestling. And at one point there was what's called and I'm not a big wrestling guy. I used to, when we were practicing in the gym and I was watching the wrestlers run stairs around our little field house up the stairs, I was just like, that's crazy. We get to run down the court, but we get to pass the ball and shoot it. And they run around and then they go in the room and sweat on each other. But so there was a dangerous move that the referee determined that this one boy got in a position, was twisting the opponent's leg. So he he gave this signal, which in basketball, this is a charging foul. But for those that are listening only, it's a hand behind the head. And the referee gave that warning, blew the whistle, and then the boy kept twisting. And so the referee, I wouldn't say he pointed his finger in his face.
He just pointed in his direction.
And his finger was actually upright, and he kind of like this, just kind of, am I correct?
Yep.
And I think basically told him to stop or let go, and then they were going to make a break and then start again. And then into your video screen comes the dad, a large man, and just like shoves the referee to the mat.
Two hands shove, just chucks him down on the ground.
So what's your take on this, Coach Crandall?
There's a lot of different directions that you could go with this. And, I think as a parent, it's just important to think about, how, if you're a parent in that situation, how would you respond? What would you do? Because from where the dad was sitting, the angle that he was at, it looked to him more like the referee was right up in his kid's face, pointing his finger, and he took exception to that and did what he thought was defending his son. And, it looks really bad on video, like when you see it. But it's an important reminder for all of us as parents to think about, what are we really trying to get? Again, 3 years from now, what do you want? What do you want the relationship with your kid to be like? Do you want your kid to be embarrassed by what you did? Yeah, it's one thing to stand up for your kid, but that's a little bit over the line.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder for all of us to just take a good look in the mirror and say, hey, am I too emotionally involved in this? Am I too wrapped up in the results? All the stuff we've been talking about for 58 episodes. Are you being intentional about being the kind of parent that is going to be somebody that your kid can be proud of?
Right. Is it possible to prepare for a championship moment? Because I'm going to speak for the father that came out. I do not condone what he did, but I can understand where he was wrapped up in the results, and he loves his son, and this is a championship match. So we always talk about this. People can say it's not a big game, or the old cliche,
it's only
a game or whatever. This was a higher stakes thing, and for them, it's a really important thing. This match was a big thing, and so he feels like he's protecting his son, standing up for his son. But I would like to ask him, what could you do in advance of a big game championship match? Very important performance on stage. What can you do in advance that's going to help you to better emotionally regulate during the match if something happens that you don't like?
Two things come to my mind. Everything's training for something. So you're always preparing for those moments. And the other thing to keep in mind is that when moments get big, the bright lights you don't rise to the occasion. You sink to the level of your training.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when the moment gets really, really big, you don't really rise to the occasion. What shows up is the training you've put in. Do you let yourself, have you handled yourself emotionally well in tough moments when nobody else is around, when it's not a championship match? And that's when you prepare. You do all the work in the dark, and then when the bright lights go on, we'll find out if you're ready or not.
Awesome. Great place to stop. Parents, we applaud you. We celebrate you. We encourage you. We know this is hard. It is the hardest thing ever. Just keep doing your best. Work on something that you can do today to improve yourself as a parent, coach, and friend in the right balance. You got this.
On behalf of Steve Galley, I'm Nate Crandall, and we thank you, our loyal listeners, for tuning in to this episode. If you love what you're learning from the Stop Parenting and Start Coaching podcast, we would appreciate it very much if you would leave us a 5-star review and some glowing comments. We also encourage you to share this episode with your friends and family who are parents of athletes and performers. And if you want to explore further and see what Steve and I are creating to help thousands of parents, athletes, and performers, please visit our company's website at createtransformbecome.com. That's createtransformbecome, all one word, .com. There you'll find a growing number of resources to help you elevate your performance. Thank you again for your support, and we encourage you to create a magical relationship with your athlete and performer.